And sometimes, that means saying what others are too comfortable to hear. There it was. The shift. The energy changed from tense civility to electric suspense. Guests froze mid-step. The quartet faltered, bowstrings trembling against strings. Even the waiters stopped moving, sensing history unspooling in real time. Melania's posture stiffened, her gaze narrowing just enough for the cameras to miss but the room to feel. She opened her mouth, maybe to respond, maybe to retreat, but the air itself seemed to resist her. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every syllable landed with the quiet authority of lived truth. In that silence, the contrast became unmistakable. One woman spoke for preservation, of image, of hierarchy, of comfort. The other spoke for liberation, of voice, of dignity, of truth. The gulf between them wasn't political. It was existential. For the first time that evening, Melania looked unsettled. Not angry, but uncertain. The armor of elegance had met the fire of authenticity, and even gold trembles in the heat. The crowd leaned in, breathless. Phones were up. Every flash illuminated the fragile facade between performance and power. Crockett drew a breath, ready to deliver the words that would define the night. Her reply started softly, but it hit like thunder. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, thick with the weight of expectation. Every camera, every whisper, every eye in the ballroom locked on Jasmine Crockett. The First Lady's last words still hung faintly in the air, a ghost of condescension wrapped in elegance. And then Jasmine smiled, not the kind of smile that begged approval, but one of quiet power. The smile of someone who'd fought for her voice and refused to surrender it. She set her glass aside and turned fully toward Melania, her posture effortless yet commanding. "You're right," she began softly, her tone smooth as silk and sharp as truth. "Class and decorum do matter. But here's the thing." She paused, letting the suspense bloom. The hush grew deeper, a low hum of electricity under crystal chandeliers. "Respect," Jasmine continued, "isn't about pearls and posture. It's about principles." The line sliced through the stillness. A soft collective O rippled through the crowd. A senator actually choked on his champagne. Somewhere near the back, a journalist's pen froze mid-air. Melania's expression didn't break, not fully. But there, the tiniest flicker, a twitch near her eye, a glance to the side, searching for an exit in a room suddenly too small. Jasmine took a step closer, not in confrontation but in conviction. "We talk so much about image in this town," she said, her voice rising, steady and strong. "Who's dressed right, who's smiling enough, who fits the picture. But leadership isn't a photo shoot. It's a responsibility." Her words fell like measured blows, not wild but surgical. "Some of us," she said, "didn't grow up behind marble walls. We grew up fighting for a seat at the table. And when we finally get here, we don't owe anyone our silence just to make them comfortable." The murmurs began, small at first, then swelling. Reporters glanced at each other, phones vibrating with breaking news alerts that hadn't even been written yet. Our Melania moment was already trending, but so was something else. Crockett clapped back. Melania blinked slowly, her lips curving into what was meant to be a serene smile. But even serenity can crack under the weight of authenticity. Jasmine didn't stop. She wasn't attacking, she was unveiling. Each word peeled back the layers of performative civility that Washington loved to worship. "You see?" she said, her voice lowering again. "Intimate now, confessional. For some people, silence looks like grace. For others, it feels like suffocation. I was taught to speak when something's wrong, even if my voice shakes, even if the room stares back in judgment." A woman near the bar clutched her heart. The senator's wife, who'd whispered earlier now, nodded slowly, caught between admiration and disbelief. "And maybe that doesn't fit the mold," Jasmine continued. "Maybe it's not what ladylike is supposed to look like. But when did dignity start meaning submission? When did truth become rudeness?" She glanced briefly around the room, at the faces representing polished power, inherited wealth, and fragile egos hiding behind politeness. "We can't confuse quiet with respect," she said. "One keeps the peace. The other keeps people silent." Melania's stillness was almost eerie now. Her signature calm, once a weapon, had turned into a mirror reflecting her own distance. For the first time, she wasn't being looked at with admiration. She was being seen, and that was far more dangerous. Jasmine softened her tone, her voice threading emotion through every word. "I know what it's like to walk into rooms where people decide who you are before you even speak. Where your confidence gets called arrogance. Where your truth gets labeled anger." The crowd was frozen, transfixed. The string quartet had stopped playing altogether. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, unsure whether to zoom in or back away. "But I also know this," Jasmine said, her hand resting gently against her chest. "Every woman who ever stood up, spoke out, or refused to shrink, she made space for the rest of us. That's what real class looks like. Not who bows the lowest, but who rises the highest again and again." The words struck deep. They weren't loud, but they carried a resonance that made the chandeliers hum. Melania exhaled slowly, the faintest shimmer of discomfort in her eyes. For years, she had wielded silence like armor, polished, impenetrable, beautiful. But now, in front of the country's cameras and the capital's elite, that silence no longer looked noble. It looked hollow. Jasmine's gaze softened, but her conviction didn't waver. "Mrs. Trump," she said gently, "you've built your legacy around grace, and that's something people admire. But grace without empathy? That's just performance." Gasps again, sharper this time. Someone dropped their fork. The sound echoed like punctuation. Jasmine didn't wait for permission to continue. "You talk about leadership," she said, "but leadership isn't about being adored. It's about being accountable. And the women I come from, we weren't raised to bow. We were raised to build." Her final words landed with the force of history itself. Generations of struggle and defiance distilled into one statement. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness. It was awe. Every guest, every aide, every reporter stood frozen, unsure whether to applaud or simply breathe. Melania's face, once so perfectly composed, flickered with something raw. A realization, perhaps, that power wasn't always about control. Sometimes it was about courage. Jasmine turned slightly, scanning the stunned crowd, then back to Melania. "Decorum has its place," she said softly. "But truth has its power." And with that, she offered a small, respectful nod, not of surrender, but of closure. A final camera flash exploded, bright, blinding, eternal. Melania looked away first. The crowd exhaled as if released from a spell. A senator muttered something under his breath. The journalists swarmed like bees drunk on history. But Jasmine didn't move. She stood centered, calm, unwavering. A portrait of what power looked like when stripped of pretense. That moment, frozen between applause and disbelief, was the birth of something larger than either of them. It wasn't just a clapback. It was a reckoning. And as the echo of her words rippled through the ballroom, through the headlines, through the country, everyone understood one thing with absolute clarity. The night no longer belonged to elegance. It belonged to truth. By morning, the moment had already become legend. The clip, just 42 seconds long, spread across every screen in America like wildfire. At first, it was shared quietly. A few journalists posted it with cautious captions. "Tense exchange at D.C. Gala. Crockett's unexpected response leaves Melania momentarily stunned." But within hours, the internet had done what it always does. Magnified, dissected, and immortalized it. Crockett vs. Melania. Grace and grit. Weren't speechless 3 hashtags. Millions of voices. One story. On TikTok, creators remixed the moment with dramatic slow-motion cuts. The exact instant when Jasmine Crockett said, "We weren't raised to bow. We were raised to build." Over it, orchestral music swelled, text flashing. "A new era of women who won't be quiet." Twitter, or what used to be Twitter, became a battlefield. Progressive users hailed it as the moment decorum met its match. Memes flooded timelines. Melania's frozen smile paired with captions like, "When grace meets truth," but conservative commentators struck back fast. Talk radio shows called it another disrespectful stunt, accusing Crockett of grandstanding for clicks. One headline sneered, "The left's new heroine? A woman who shouts at the First Lady." Cable news split down the middle. On MSNBC, a panel of women discussed authenticity versus appearance. One commentator said softly, "For decades, we've been told to be seen and not heard." Crockett just flipped that narrative in front of the world. Meanwhile, on Fox News, a host smirked, "Decorum is dead," and apparently that's something to celebrate. But outside the noise of pundits, something quieter and deeper began to take shape. Clips of Jasmine's speech flooded Instagram reels. Set to empowerment anthems by Beyoncé and Alicia Keys, teen girls stitched the video with personal stories of standing up to teachers, bosses, parents, moments when they refused to shrink. The captions read, "My Crockett moment." Mother shared it too. Women who had worked double shifts, endured dismissive bosses, kept their heads down for years. Their comments echoed one message. Finally, someone said it out loud. Even celebrities joined in. Viola Davis posted the clip with a single word: power. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez quote-tweeted it with fire emojis, and late-night hosts couldn't resist. On The Daily Show, the monologue opened with a freeze frame of Melania's expression. The audience roared. The host quipped, "That's the exact moment she realized silence doesn't work when the mic belongs to someone else." On Saturday Night Live, they recreated the gala scene. The parody ended not in mockery, but in applause, a rare moment when comedy bowed to conviction. By the weekend, Jasmine Crockett's follower count had tripled. But more than fame, she'd sparked something harder to measure, a conversation that wasn't really about politics anymore. It was about power, about the illusion of politeness as a weapon, about how women, especially women of color, are expected to be graceful even while being disrespected. In coffee shops, classrooms, and kitchen tables, people debated what respect really meant. A viral Medium post summed it up perfectly. Melania Trump represented the image America was told to admire: perfect, polished, unbothered. Jasmine Crockett represented the truth America needed to hear: unfiltered, unafraid, unashamed. The phrase "grace versus grit" became a headline on magazine covers. Editorials called it a generational shift, from silence as strength to speech as power. Even in conservative circles, something softened. A few columnists admitted almost grudgingly that Crockett's composure and clarity had a rare authenticity. But for Jasmine herself, it was never about viral fame. In an interview days later, she simply said, "I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to remind people we don't need permission to speak with purpose." And yet, her words had become a rallying cry. The clip continued to ripple outward, translated, subtitled, reposted in languages across the world. From Nairobi to New Delhi, from Sao Paulo to Seoul, women repeated the line, "We weren't raised to bow. We were raised to build." The image of that night, Melania frozen, Jasmine standing firm, had transcended the gala, the politics, the partisanship. It had become something mythic. It wasn't about two women anymore. It was about every woman who ever swallowed her truth to seem graceful. Every woman who'd been told to sit still, smile more, say less. For once, silence wasn't elegance. It was defeat. In the days that followed, the noise began to fade, but the meaning only deepened. What had started as a spark between two women in a glittering ballroom had ignited a national conversation about what dignity really looks like in America. For years, the country had worshipped the image, the perfect pose, the immaculate speech, the carefully controlled smile. Silence was mistaken for grace. Distance was mistaken for strength. And yet, in that single night, Jasmine Crockett had reminded the nation of something it had quietly forgotten: That true class isn't about silence. It's about standing tall for what's right. Her calm defiance stood in sharp contrast to Melania's fragile composure. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't rebellion. It was reclamation, a voice of truth, of authenticity. Where Melania represented a generation taught to survive by staying quiet, Jasmine embodied the one that survives by speaking out. The moment had become more than political. It was cultural, spiritual even. It spoke to every person who'd ever been told that dignity means keeping your head down. It told them that dignity is not submission. It's the courage to meet arrogance with integrity. Commentators framed it as a clash of aesthetics, grace versus grit, but that missed the point. What the world had witnessed was the death of pretense, the realization that power wrapped in politeness is still power used to exclude. Jasmine's words stripped that illusion bare, revealing something raw and honest beneath it. The truth that empathy, not elegance, defines leadership. Across communities, people began to use the word respect differently. It no longer meant pleasing those above you. It meant honoring yourself, your roots, your principles. Teachers quoted Crockett in classrooms. Mothers repeated her lines to their daughters. Activists printed her words on posters. Even those who disagreed with her politically couldn't deny the emotional resonance, because something in her tone, in her quiet certainty, cut through the chaos of modern America, the anger, the division, the spectacle, and spoke to something purer. It reminded the country that justice doesn't always wear a suit or a smile. Sometimes it wears conviction. That night, Melania Trump represented the fading facade, the belief that appearance is enough to command respect. Jasmine Crockett represented the evolution of that belief, that respect is earned by what you stand for, not how you're seen. It was more than a cultural contrast. It was a passing of the torch. In a nation weary of empty speeches and photo-op compassion, the encounter felt almost revolutionary. Because it wasn't scripted, it wasn't poll-tested or media-trained. It was real, and that's why it resonated. The confrontation at that gala became a mirror for America. Some saw arrogance challenged. Others saw truth defended. But nearly everyone saw themselves, in one way or another, reflected in that exchange, and as the story faded from headlines, its echo lingered in the public consciousness. An invitation to redefine grace, not as silence, but as courage. Jasmine Crockett didn't shatter the idea of elegance. She redefined it. She proved that poise isn't about holding your tongue. It's about holding your ground. That the most graceful thing a person can do is to speak truth with calm, even when the room trembles. It wasn't about winning a verbal duel. It was about restoring a moral center, one where humility and strength walk hand in hand. In that way, her words transcended politics entirely. They became a kind of anthem for a new America, flawed, diverse, imperfect, but unafraid to face itself in the mirror. Because power may dazzle, but integrity endures. Because the truth may make people uncomfortable, but it never fades. And because, in the end, grace doesn't whisper. It roars. Melania Trump tried to play tough that night, to wear elegance like armor, to turn silence into strength. But when Jasmine Crockett spoke, that armor cracked. Her truth wasn't loud, it wasn't cruel, and it was undeniable. And for the first time, the woman who had built her image on control found herself completely, utterly speechless. That moment wasn't about humiliation. It was about revelation, the kind that peels away illusion and leaves only authenticity standing. It showed America something profound, that power without empathy is empty, and that courage spoken softly can echo louder than any insult. Melania played tough. Crockett stood tall. And history, as it often does, chose truth over pretense, because real strength isn't polished. It's human. It's messy. It's the kind of strength that speaks up when it would be easier to smile and stay silent. And that's what Jasmine embodied. Not defiance for attention, but dignity in action. So if you believe in courage over comfort, hit subscribe. If you believe truth should never need permission, share this story. And if you believe in the kind of grace that doesn't hide but rises, join the movement that celebrates truth, not titles, because this isn't just a viral moment, it's a mirror, showing us who we are and who we still can be. As the music fades and the final words appear on screen, the message is simple, powerful, inevitable. The future belongs to those who speak.